Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Hobie, as some of you already know, and this is Guns of Icarus Alliances. For those of you that are not already aware, this is the iteration of the game that will focus much more on cooperative play against the new AI opponents as opposed to actual PvP, and features all new equipment, ships, weapons, and even a faction and resource system. It's really cool. I highly recommend checking it out. I'm going to keep things relatively simple for now, and just go over some of the new ships, weapons, and equipment, as I haven't really had a chance to dive into anything else, but that may be a later episode if you're interested. Now, it's worth noting that these new ships may be faction-specific, and that could affect your decision on who you want to side with quite a bit in the future. My understanding, which is admittedly limited at this point, is that some factions will have exclusive access to certain ships, and possibly weapons too. Again, it's still early in the process, so I don't think it matters just yet, but I may release another video detailing the ins and outs of all that in the future. So without further ado, let's take a look at some of the new ships that we'll be piloting. Let's start with the Magnate, a beautiful ship with some very clear references to early Chinese sailing vessels. I like to call it the angsty bigger brother of the goldfish. It boasts a truly impressive amount of weaponry, bringing 6 weapons to bear, with 2 light weapons and a heavy weapon on each side. It's worth noting that the weapons are all canted at different angles facing the front of the ship, which means you have many firing options at a time, but you might start to lose options as you pass your enemies, especially considering the abysmal turning rate of the ship. Broadsides will be devastating, but short, if you can't keep your firing arcs lined up. I would recommend weapons that have broad turning arcs towards the back of the ship, to keep up the rate of fire while you can. Its top speeds are actually pretty impressive, easily keeping pace with the likes of even the Squid. This ship can really fly if you know what you're doing, but it is quite fragile. What it makes up for in raw speed, it really lacks in armor. Equipped with only as much armor as the likes of the Spire, it's not hard to deal a heavy hit to this ship. However, it does have a fair amount of health, meaning you can take the hits when you absolutely need to. With the addition of the failsafe kit, a piece of equipment I'll talk about more later on, your engineers can spend more time on the weapons than they were previously able to do, opening up more options of attack for the savvy captain. Next up is the Crusader. This thing is a beast! It's likely to be the longest ship in the game, making you quite a large target if you're not careful. Though wielding slightly less armor than a galleon, it may not make a difference. This ship has an interesting setup, which is a boon and a nightmare at the same time. It has internal balloons, meaning from the front you present a very small target. It can bring a minimum of both your heavy weapons and maybe some smaller weapons with wider turning arcs to bear, and keep your balloons completely covered at the same time. Again, as with the Magnate, the weapons are all canted at an angle, giving you several firing options for 4 light and 2 heavy weapons you come equipped with. Despite abysmally low top speeds, the ship can practically turn on a dime, so keeping your enemies right where you want them shouldn't prove difficult, especially with liberal use of Phoenix Claw. Now, the nightmare that I previously mentioned is that the ship is 3 levels, meaning your engineers have a long travel time to move about the ship, and the guns may not be manned until it's too late without proper planning. Despite high armor, the ship is actually relatively fragile once it goes down, meaning having engineers up to the task of managing several stretched out positions is crucial. It's also worth noting that the captain will have a very tough time seeing below his ship as he's set back a ways onto the top deck. Communication will be key, but it will be rewarded handily. Our last stop is the Shrike. Taking obvious inspiration from some sort of phoenix-like bird, it embodies that same fragileness. With very low armor and hull strength, this thing shouldn't be taking any broadsides. It's actually surprisingly slow for its size too, slower even than that of the Spire, but more than makes up for it in maneuverability. Boasting a heavy weapon and a light weapon on each side of the ship, this thing brings a total of 4 weapons into combat. A ship of this size wielding that much firepower opens up a host of new options. For example, a sniper build. Hitting a ship that small at long range could be difficult, doubly so as it keeps pegging you with insistent sniper fire. It does have a wicked looking spike on the front, but I wouldn't suggest trying to ram anything with this ship if it can be helped. It's just too slow and fragile. Engineering a ship of this size is a cakewalk, with only 2 floors and everything very close together. There's no reason it shouldn't have decent survivability with the help of a savvy engineer or 2. That being said, the captain will have a very hard time seeing enemies that are above them, due to the recessed nature of the cockpit. This thing excels at damaging broadside attacks, but all of its weapons are side-facing, meaning an opponent coming directly at you could be serious trouble. Fast, maneuverable ships that can sit in your blind spots can mean serious trouble for your ship if you're not careful. Now, this last ship is a bit of an oddity. I wasn't actually able to get it into a game, so you'll have to excuse the lack of detail on the model, but the Corsair seems to be a powerhouse of a ship. Boasting maxed out armor, hull strength, and weaponry, this thing is a beast, failing only when it comes to top speed. It even has a respectable turning radius on it. It comes equipped with three heavy weapons and 3 light weapons, with at least 1 weapon facing every direction. The only relative blind spot on this thing seems to be right above it, due to the gigantic balloon that blocks its sight. It looks to be relatively small, but it's built like a friggin' fortress, with 3 levels of accessibility by a series of ladders. As with some of the previous ships, getting around this thing may be rough, but it's got the armor and the health to hold off almost any serious assault. Next up is the weapons, everybody's favorite part. Now, as of the date that I'm recording this, there are no new heavy weapons, but they more than make up for it with 4 new light weapons. Let's start with the Zeus Weaponized Coil. As its name clearly implies, this thing shoots electricity, but don't expect a little static shock. This thing hurls lightning bolts that can chain to adjacent ships. With a minimum charging time of 3 seconds and a maximum of 6, it doesn't put out very much fire very fast, but it makes up for it in damage potential. This thing excels at damaging the components on enemy ships, and even has a respectable piercing damage to boot. Against a single target, it's nothing to write home about, but where it really shines is against several small targets, specifically in the alliance mode of the game. You'll face several darting flyers at a time, and the Zeus can easily dispatch several at once. Not to mention, it just sounds awesome when you fire it. Next is the Carb gas mortar. Am I pronouncing that right? I'm actually not sure. This is a new type of weapon for Guns of Icarus. It fires canisters of caustic gases that create a cloud wherever they hit, or once detonated. It's an arming distance of 60 meters, meaning no close-range broadsides, but past that mark they can be manually detonated in case the shot was going to miss a direct hit. Not only can you aim at any enemy, you can aim where they're going to as well. Each cloud will last 30 seconds before dispersing, and they have the added benefit of slowing and damaging anyone foolish enough to fly through them. I like to think of this as a useful alternative to the mine launcher, or an excellent tool to use on a crippled or slow ship, specifically snipers whom you need to dislodge from a safe distance by forcing them to move. Its rate of fire is decent, but the magazine only holds 2 charges before you need to reload, so don't expect to gas the whole map with this thing. Next up is the Heyoka guided missile launchers. This is the first fly-by-wire weapon introduced in the game, and it packs a few nasty surprises to boot. After 0.25 seconds, the missile splits into a series of sub-munitions that swarm the target. This offers excellent cluster damage at long range, but can be a bit finicky. The rockets weave in and out, and can miss the target at inopportune distances. While some will most likely hit, there's no guarantee that they all will. But that hardly matters with 3 to 4 of these things firing at a time. The missiles do a great job of following your target, and this only makes staying in a firing arc more important. Not only do you need to get the shot to begin with, you have to keep it to guide the missiles. During dogfights, this can be difficult, and missiles can't really turn around to come back to the target you designate. It's kind of fun to watch them spiral off, though. Being the only new weapon to deliver explosive damage so far, it's probably my favorite new addition to the game. Our last stop is the Apollo Lens Array. This thing is straight out of sci-fi. It's an extremely long-range laser weapon, but loses effectiveness past 750 meters. It only deals incendiary damage, so don't expect to cut ships in half at long range or anything, as chem spray is an effective countermeasure against it. That being said, its rate of fire is fast, and its reloads are relatively short, all things considered. Its turning arcs leave a little to be desired, especially considering that the longer you fire, the slower it turns, a trade-off for the increased damage. I would consider this one excellent harassment tool, but don't expect too much of it on its own. Every engineer knows what a hassle fire is, so it could very well be the weapon that turns the tide of an engagement by pulling people off guns or other repairs to put out fire. All in all, definitely a thumbs up on this thing. On the topic of engineering, our last item on today's menu is the Failsafe Kit. This little wonder opens up a whole new world of opportunities for buffing engineers. Literally offering an engineer the ability to fix 2 things at once, you could use it as you would a normal buff hammer. Fill up the meter, and the weapon gets a buff. While it's in good shape, there are no immediate effects, but upon taking damage and breaking, so long as the buff is active, it'll automatically start to repair itself at a rate of 4 per second. For ships with weak components, such as the Squid's armor, this could really turn the tide of an engagement. Keeping the armor buffed with this tool would allow it to immediately start rebuilding as soon as it goes down, meaning an engineer would only have to deliver 1 or 2 smacks before returning to more pressing matters. This opens up a whole avenue of builds, meaning more daring captains may try to bring on only 1 engineer, or may change their whole loadout altogether. In addition to the failsafe kit, you also have the option of bringing the armor kit, an effective replacement for the buff hammer on everything but weapons. This thing adds a layer of armor onto the component of your choice that must be destroyed before the component's health can be drained. It's worth noting that this thing is massively useful, allowing you to fly straight into barrages of enemy fire while keeping your equipment at full health. For ships with weak armor, this can practically double your survivability. Be warned though, you can only have 1 buff at a time, so you have to pick and choose what would be most useful. Anyways, I hope you guys really enjoyed this video and liked what you saw. Pre-ordering for Guns of Icarus Alliances is already available, and once you do, you can get access to the dev app and access the current build of Alliances after emailing the devs if you want to see it for yourself. They've been hard at work on this for a while, and I'm really excited to see what else they have to offer. I hope you guys enjoyed this little sneak peek, and I'll see you all next time.